Have you ever sat down to do something you know you need to do and somehow an hour disappears? Not because you were scrolling, not because you were tired, but because you opened your laptop and your brain immediately said, okay, but first, let's think about everything. If you've ever stared at a screen thinking, why is this so hard? Stay with me, because this episode isn't really about motivation, even though it feels like it is.
Welcome back to Clear the Noise. I'm Zaya.
And I'm Alec. Clear the Noise is a podcast for adults with ADHD who feel mentally overloaded and want a clear next step. Not more advice, not more systems, definitely not more pressure. Just fewer things competing for your attention so action feels possible again. Today we're talking about motivation, specifically how often we blame motivation for things it didn't actually break. Because I just need motivation sounds reasonable until you realize how often it actually means I'm waiting to feel like a completely different person. Let me tell you about a moment that used to repeat itself constantly for me. I blocked off an entire afternoon. No meetings, no emergencies, just time. I remember thinking, this is it. This is when I finally catch up and become a functional adult. I sat down, opened my laptop, and immediately, nothing happens. Instead, my brain launches into what I can only describe as a productivity planning meeting that absolutely no one asked for. Should I start with email or the form I've been avoiding? If I start with email, should I clear my inbox completely or just the urgent ones? If I start with the form, do I need to gather documents first? Should I check my calendar? What if there's something more important I'm forgetting? And just to be clear, I still haven't done anything, but I already feel tense and weirdly tired. About 10 minutes in, that familiar voice shows up. Wow, you had all this time and you're already wasting it. Why can't you just start like a normal person? You really need to work on your motivation. Which is impressive, honestly, because my brain managed to criticize me before I'd even begun.
That's efficiency.
Very efficient. Gold star. From the outside, this looks like procrastination, but inside it feels different. It feels like standing in the middle of an intersection where every light is green and every car is moving at once, and somehow you're supposed to pick one without getting hit. Here's what took me way too long to understand. I wasn't lazy, I wasn't motivated, I wasn't broken. I was trying to choose between too many reasonable options at the same time. And ADHD brains are terrible at that. ADHD brains don't struggle with ideas, they struggle with filtering. So when everything feels important, urgent, and possible, the system freezes. Not because it doesn't want to move, but because it doesn't know where to move. This is where motivation gets misunderstood. We treat motivation like fuel, like if we could just fill the tank, everything would start working. But motivation isn't the engine. Clarity is. Motivation shows up after the path is narrow enough. Think about the last time you actually followed through on something. Chances are the decision was already made for you. A deadline, a clear instruction, one obvious next step. You didn't sit there weighing 10 options, you just moved. That wasn't motivation, that was relief.
And that takes so much pressure off because you don't have to feel ready first.
Exactly. Every time I waited to feel motivated, nothing happened. Every time I reduced options first, action followed, quietly, without drama. No inspirational music, no sudden personality change, just movement. And this shows up everywhere. You want to write, but you're deciding tone, audience, length, timing, and whether it's worth saying at all. You want to exercise, but you're choosing between routines, locations, durations, and whether today is the right day. You want to make progress, but you're trying to choose the best way instead of a way. So motivation gets blamed when the real issue is too many open loops fighting for attention. Let me slow this down because this is where a lot of people quietly recognize themselves. This is the moment where you're not avoiding the task, you're circling it. You're thinking about it in the shower, while driving, while lying in bed thinking, tomorrow I'll do it differently. Then tomorrow comes, you sit down, and your brain opens 20 tabs, not on your computer, in your head. You start mentally rehearsing outcomes. If I start this, how long will it take? What if I do it wrong? What if there's a better way I haven't thought of yet? What if I start and realize I should have done something else first? None of those thoughts are irrational. They're just loud. This is where people get stuck for months, sometimes years, not because they can't do the thing, but because their brain keeps insisting on deciding everything first. And that's exhausting. Here's the part I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't need clarity about the entire situation. You only need enough clarity to take one step without your nervous system going into full alarm mode. That's it. Not confidence, not certainty, not motivation, just enough quiet to move. Back to that afternoon. What finally helped wasn't a productivity trick. It wasn't a timer. It wasn't pushing harder. I stopped trying to choose the right option. I chose one thing to eliminate. I told myself, I'm not touching my inbox today. That was it. And suddenly, the form I'd been avoiding didn't feel inspiring, but it felt quiet. Quiet enough to start. That's the core idea of this episode. You don't need motivation. You need fewer options. When options shrink, the nervous system settles. When the nervous system settles, action becomes possible. Not because you're suddenly disciplined, but because the noise finally dropped below the threshold. One last thing before we wrap up. If you're listening and thinking, okay, this makes sense, but I still didn't do the thing, that doesn't mean this didn't work. That's not failure. That's information. A lot of us expect clarity to feel dramatic, like one day we'll wake up energized and think, wow, today's the day, let's fix everything. That moment almost never comes. What usually shows up instead is much quieter. You don't feel excited, you don't feel confident, you just feel slightly less resistant. And that's actually the signal you're waiting for.
Because less resistance is still movement.
Exactly. Real motivation often sounds like, I guess I could do this one small part now. Not inspiring, not impressive, just possible. So if today all this did was help you understand why things feel hard, that still counts for today. Understanding reduces shame, and shame is one of the loudest forms of noise there is. You're not behind, you're not broken, and you're not missing motivation. You're just carrying too much at once.
We hope you got something useful from this episode.
If one idea made things feel a little lighter, that's enough for today. Thanks for spending this time with us. We'll talk again soon.